Hello, my name is Douglas Laudenschlager, and I work on the documentation team for Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services. Today you're going to learn how you can familiarize yourself with an unfamiliar database or look for problems in existing data by using the data profiling task, which is new in Integration Services in SQL Server 2008. You will learn to configure and run the data profiling task in an Integration Services package, to run the standalone Data Profile Viewer application to view the output of the task, and to understand and analyze the output of the task that you see in the Data Profile Viewer. Now let's get started. Here we are in Business Intelligence Development Studio, where we've already created a new Integration Services project and opened the new package in the Designer. Let's locate the data profiling task among the control flow items in the toolbox and drag it onto the design surface. Now, before we can configure the task itself, we need to set up the two connection managers that the task expects for its input and its output. The data profiling task takes its input from an ADO.NET connection, so we'll create a new ADO.NET connection manager that points to the AdventureWorks sample database. The data profiling task uses only ADO.NET connections, and in this release, it profiles only Microsoft SQL Server data sources. The data profiling task sends its output to a file in XML format, so we also need a file connection manager. Here we will configure our file connection manager to overwrite an existing output file from a previous run. And now we're prepared to configure the data profiling task itself. When we open the editor for the data profiling task, our first task is to assign the file connection manager that we just created as the destination for the task's output. Because we want to overwrite the existing file with fresh data, we also change the value of the overwrite destination property from false to true. If we look on the profile request page, we see there are 8 different profile types that the task can compute. For many of these, there are numerous options that you can specify. However, all these options will make more sense to you if we look first at sample output from the data profiling task. So let's take a shortcut. Let's come back here to the General tab and pick the Quick Profile option. What Quick Profile does is run up to 7 of the available profiles with default options against a single table of our choosing. For our demonstration, we'll select the person.address table in the AdventureWorks sample database and all 7 of the profiles that are available for us to compute. Now the task is configured and ready to go. Because it takes a minute to run, we're going to take another shortcut and look at the output from a previous run. For that purpose, we need to use the Data Profile Viewer, which is a separate standalone application. Here I've just opened our output file in the Data Profile Viewer. Before we take a closer look at the output itself, let's talk for a moment about the panes that you see here in the Data Profile Viewer window. On the left here in the Profiles pane, you see the structure of your data and the profiles that you selected to run. At the top right in the Results pane, you see a summary of the results of the profile. In the center right, here in the Details pane, you see rich detail about your data that you can easily sort, and that is presented in both text and graphical format. And if the data against which you ran your profile is still available, you can view the details of each set of data in the drill down pane at the bottom right. Now let's look at the profiles that are available to us. The data profiling task can run 5 profiles that examine individual columns and an additional 3 profiles that look at relationships between columns. For a single column, the simplest of all profiles is the column null ratio profile, which computes the percentage of null values in a given column and can help you to identify null values where there should not be any. Here we see that in the person.address table, only the address line 2 column contains some null values, which is acceptable. You can also compute a column length distribution profile, which shows you the shortest and longest length of strings in a column. This profile can help you to identify unacceptable string values that are shorter or longer than the column requires. Here we see that the non-null entries for address line 2 in the AdventureWorks database range from 1 to 28 characters in length, and if we sort them, we see that the most common is a 5-character string. If we drill down, we see that those 5-character lines are commonly apartment numbers. We can also compute a column value distribution profile. This tells us, for example, that in the city column in the AdventureWorks sample database, there are 575 distinct values. Why, if we look in the details pane, do we not see 575 cities listed? If we sort them, we see that only details are shown for values that represent more than 1/10 of 1% of the existing data. This is one of the many options that you can set when you configure the task. The column statistics profile is computed for numeric and date columns and shows us for numbers the minimum and maximum value as well as the mean and standard deviation. For date columns, it shows us the earliest and the latest in a range of dates. Again, this can help to alert you to numbers or dates that are out of range. The final profile that can be computed for an individual column is the column pattern profile. This is a more unusual profile that returns a set of regular expressions that cover all the values in the column. You could take these regular expressions and use them in a custom application, either to validate existing data or to validate user input before the data makes it into the database. Now let's look at the profiles that analyze the relationships between columns. The candidate key profile identifies columns with a high degree of uniqueness, which would be candidates to become a primary key. If there were violations of the uniqueness, we would also see those here. Of course, there are no violations here in the AdventureWorks table, since the uniqueness of this primary key is already enforced by a constraint. We don't see the value inclusion profile here in our sample output because it's not run by the quick profile option that we used, but it looks at foreign key relationships in a way that's similar to what the candidate key profile does for primary key relationships. The functional dependency profile is one of the more interesting and powerful profiles. Let's take a look at an example of a functional dependency. For a given postal code, you would always expect the state or province to be predictable and unchanging. Here we see, however, in our output that this is only 99% true in the AdventureWorks sample database, telling us right away that we have some rows with invalid values for state province ID. If we look at one of the examples of a postal code that has violations and drill down, we can see for this local Washington state zip code both the rows in which the state is shown correctly and the one row in which the value is incorrect. In this video, you learned how you can familiarize yourself with an unfamiliar database or look for problems in existing data by using the data profiling task, which is new in integration services in SQL Server 2008. You also learned how to configure and run the data profiling task in an integration services package, how to run the standalone Data Profile Viewer application to view the output of the task, and to understand and analyze the output of the task that you see in the Data Profile Viewer. We hope that you've gained new information and useful skills from this video. After you close the video and return to the web page, you'll find some other Integration Services how-to videos that are available for you to watch. Thank you.